This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Residents of eastern DRC protest killing of civilians by ADF rebels. Ethiopia awaits referendum results to create a semi-autonomous state in the restive Sidama region. And the Hong Kong government warns a new bill passed by the US Congress sends the wrong message to violent protesters. This is Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Peninah Karibe, and with me in studio with the latest business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. East Africa's trading bloc postpones its summit amid simmering diplomatic tensions. And Egypt is voted the fastest growing tourist destination in Africa. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for an attack that killed 30 soldiers in Mali earlier this week. According to a statement published by the SITE intelligence group, another 30 soldiers were wounded in Monday's ambush. The attack was the third major strike against Malian forces in the last 2 months by jihadist groups. The militants are mounting increasingly sophisticated operations across the Sahel region. In early November, Islamic State claimed responsibility for an attack on an army post that killed at least 53 soldiers, while an Al-Qaeda affiliate said it carried out coordinated raids in late September that killed 38 soldiers. The United Nations Assistant Secretary General Bintou Keita says the situation in the Sahel region is becoming a serious concern. Keita is urging the UN Security Council to take immediate action to restore peace in the region. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
Over the past 6 months, the security situation in the Sahel has continued to deteriorate, and now the United Nations Security Council is expressing concern.
Over the past 6 months, the security situation in the Sahel region has continued to worsen. Attacks attributed to or claimed by terrorist groups against the security forces and the civilian population have multiplied, as have violent incidents pitting members of various communities against one another.
The permanent observer of the African Union to the United Nations, Fatima Mohammed, says the Sahel region can only win the battle against terrorism if bodies such as the AU and the United Nations, together with the international community, come together.
As rightly emphasized by the Secretary General in his report, and I quote, "Terrorism is a global issue, and the entire international community has a responsibility to contribute to its defeat."
This year, the number of security incidents have risen by folds in the Sahel region, with violence further spreading to the coast and along the Sahel-Sahara Strip. Recent attacks by rebels have seen over 50 troops killed in Mali. Over 24 people recently died in Burkina Faso after an attack against extremists. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Burundi's ruling Radebu Party top official says 8 soldiers were killed in an ambush along its border with Rwanda. He did not name the attackers, but he said his government will not hesitate to take the necessary security measures in the face of such aggressions. The Tuesday night attack at a military base is the latest and the deadliest in a string of raids targeting military installations. An unknown number of soldiers are still missing.
Parti politique agréé.
As the ruling party, we warn that if this kind of aggression is repeated, they will not hesitate to encourage the government of Burundi to respond and appeal to the right to pursue the enemy.
Ethiopian election officials have been counting votes following a referendum held in the country's Sidama region. Sidama residents voted on Wednesday on whether or not to have the southern zone recognized as a new federal state. An Ethiopian federal state has the power to control its own police, schools and other essential services. Days of unrest in Ethiopia's southern region in July prompted the Sidama to push for greater autonomy. Experts view the referendum as a test for a country already dealing with intercommunal tensions. Officials expect to release results of the referendum late on Thursday or Friday. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi joined us earlier from Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa for an update on the voting counting process. She also gave us a deeper look into what happens if the referendum passes.
So far, it has been described as a peaceful voting process. We've seen the National Electoral Board saying that there were no really major anomalies during the voting, and also the Human Rights Commission saying that it has not noticed any human rights violations during the voting. We've also seen the Prime Minister himself tweeting and congratulating the people of Sidama. He tweeted today in the morning saying that it is a good step that they went towards the peaceful way. So now the biggest issue is as the vote counting continues and preliminary results are expected anytime from now, the government is encouraging people to restrict from speculative thinking, speculative issues, especially on social media, because right now we're already dealing with a situation whereby people are saying there's some fake news going out, giving the fake results of the Sidama results. So people have been urged to wait for the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia to announce at least the preliminary results. Excitement for most of them, because and the excitement we can gauge from the fact that 2.3 million people registered to vote. Probably not all of them voted. Some of them cited being discouraged by people who want Sidama to remain in the southern nations and nationalities region, but many of them voted as early as 6 a.m. So there has been excitement, people really looking forward to the fact that they are hoping that with the vote, they'll be able to get something that they've been crying for or asking for the past almost 3 decades. But there's also the other aspect. There are also other people who have said probably the Sidama did not need to really get out of the southern nations and nationalities region. And the government has been encouraging them, go to the ballot box and express yourself there by either voting yes or voting no. So both excitement from the majority of the people in Sidama and also people who are not members of the Sidama community, and also some skepticism from some of them. And all this is prescribed in described in the constitution of Ethiopia. So once the vote is out, and for example, if the vote is in the favor of people of Sidama to move out of the southern nations and nationality region, then we have what we call the state council within the southern region. The state council of the southern region will hand over power to the people of Sidama, and then they'll be able to follow the constitution and form their own smaller regional government. And if the results are on the other side, then the Sidama people will continue being members of the southern nation and nationalities region. The concern here is the reaction of the people depending on how the vote will go. And the government is keen, hoping that it does not really incite violence, it does not incite the current ethnic clashes that we are seeing. So everybody is, looking at Sidama and hoping that the results will not trigger anything beyond peace.
Coletta Wanjohi speaking to us earlier from Addis Ababa. On to Somalia now, and the country is mourning after a female activist died in unclear circumstances. Almas Elman is believed to have died on the spot after a stray bullet hit her in Mogadishu's Green Zone area. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilu has more from Mogadishu.
Police in Somalia say they're investigating circumstances in which Almas Elman, a Somali-Canadian human rights activist and former diplomat, was killed in the country's capital, Mogadishu. Authorities suggest that Almas died from a stray bullet that hit her vehicle inside the heavily fortified airport compound that hosts foreign embassies, United Nations and African Union headquarters.
Almas Elman
was an important person in Somalia. The Criminal Investigation Department has opened an immediate investigation into the latest killing. We have tasked senior experts to commence investigations, and we plan to make the findings public.
Almas served as a diplomat in the Somali mission in Kenya before taking up a new role with the European Union delegation to Somalia. Lawmakers now want thorough investigation into the killing.
We want the federal government to speed up investigation into the incident and highlight the circumstances in which Almas was killed. The location of the attack is considered one of the safest zones. We want to know why and how she was targeted.
Almas comes from a well-known family of activists. In 1996, her father Elman Ali was killed in Mogadishu by unknown gunmen. The family later fled to Canada. Decades later, the Elman family relocated back to Somalia. Ilwad heads the Elman Peace and Human Rights Center. The 30-year-old activist was recently nominated for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize for her role in supporting disengaged combatants reintegrate into society. The youngest daughter is also a lieutenant in the country's national army, leading the fight to eradicate extremism in the Horn of African nation. In July, Hodan Nale, a Somali-Canadian social activist, was killed in a terrorist attack in the southern port city of Kismayo. Militant group Al-Shabaab took credit for that attack. A month later, Abdurrahman Omar Osman, a Somali-British citizen, was killed after a female suicide bomber detonated explosives at a security gathering in Mogadishu. Osman was the mayor of Mogadishu and the governor of Benadir region, and a former minister who had returned back to Somalia after years of being an activist in London. Attacks on prominent personalities, mainly from the diaspora, have gone up in recent years, raising fears about the security situation in the East African nation. Since 2013, thousands of Somalis have returned back from Europe, North America, Asia and other Gulf nations to play a role in the rebuilding of their nation. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
At least 73 migrants have been rescued off the Libyan coast by Spanish charity ship Open Arms. They were packed on a rubber dinghy that had been drifting in the waters for nearly 24 hours. Most of the migrants are from Central and West Africa. They included women and children. One of the rescued migrants is nursing a gunshot wound suspected to have been sustained in Libya. This is the latest rescue for the Spanish ship, whose operations have put it at loggerheads with some European governments.
We were just rescued by the Open Arms and we are very happy. We don't know how to show how happy we are, but we are very happy, grateful. Me and my team, my friends and my family, all of us, we are very happy. Thank you, Open Arms. God bless you. Keep doing your work. It's a great job. God richly bless you. You and your team, everybody. Thank you. We love you. Bye.
Hundreds of people in the Democratic Republic of Congo took to the streets of the eastern town of Beni to protest against the killings of civilians by rebels. The protest was held a day after 12 people were killed by rebels suspected of belonging to an Islamist militia known as the Allied Democratic Forces. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more.
Residents in the eastern DRC town of Beni staged the protest over the killing of their neighbors by militia groups. An attack on Tuesday left at least 12 people dead and several others injured. Local authorities blamed it on the Allied Democratic Forces, a Ugandan Islamist group that operates in eastern DRC. The protesters marched to the office of the UN peacekeeping mission, who they accuse of failing to protect them. But the UN peacekeeping mission spokesperson denied their claim.
We are very aware of the situation. We know that protection of civilians is at the core of our mandate, and it's what we are doing at the present time by supporting the FRDC in their operations and by trying to protect the population living close to the battlefield.
Civil society organizations in Beni say more than 40 people have been killed by militia groups over the past 2 weeks. The locals are demanding the immediate withdrawal of all UN peacekeepers in their area. The UN, however, says it cannot just leave basing on the demand of protesters.
But it's not up to us to decide if we leave or not. It's up to the Security Council or to the government of the DRC to say, okay, it's enough is enough. You should go home because we think that for X reason.
The attacks by the militia groups in Beni have increased since the Congolese army launched an offensive against them at the end of October. The army recently said it killed 25 members of the ADF rebels. Local leaders believe the rebels are killing civilians in retaliation for the military offensive. The DRC president ordered the army to wipe out all armed groups operating in the east of the country early this year. The attacks by the rebels have seriously affected attempts to contain the Ebola outbreak in North Kivu province. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take our first break this hour. Coming up. The Hong Kong government warns a new bill passed by the US Congress sends the wrong message to violent protesters. And how Kenya HIV self-testing kits is bridging testing gap among untested groups.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore, We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Hong Kong courts have prosecuted more than 200 people over their involvement in the standoff between police and protesters at the Polytechnic University. A 12-year-old is among those prosecuted. Fewer than 100 remain on the campus of Poly U. Much of the campus is damaged, with rooms vandalized and windows shattered. Despite the unrest, the district councils are still preparing to hold local elections scheduled for Sunday. The government says it is closely monitoring the situation to make sure the elections can be held safely. Meanwhile, Beijing has slammed the U.S. Senate for passing 2 bills over Hong Kong. The Senate passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and a legislation banning sales of tear gas, rubber bullets and other equipment to Hong Kong security forces. China has vowed to take countermeasures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. Hong Kong's Chief Secretary for Administration has blasted the passage of the bill in Washington, and the Secretary of Education insists that schools are places of learning and not politics.
I already issued a statement this afternoon. The government's decision is pretty clear. It's a blatant act of interference in Hong Kong's internal affairs. The act itself is totally unwarranted, unnecessary, and also it's in nobody's interest to have the act enacted, because it also hurts American interests in Hong Kong. Not only Hong Kong itself, because the United States has a huge stake in Hong Kong, enjoying over the last 10 years a huge surplus. It enjoys the largest surplus ever in the world. Individual economies is Hong Kong. So they are a major beneficiary from Hong Kong's economy. So I hope that really common sense will prevail at the end of the day.
We'd like to reiterate that schools serve the purpose of learning, not for expressing political pursuits or distracting students from their studies. So students should not hold or participate in activities to vent their political stances in the campus.
The recent wave of protests in Hong Kong has drawn reactions across Africa. People are calling for a halt to the violence. They're also questioning the ultimate aim of the demonstrators who have clashed with the police for months. Let's hear what some of them have to say.
The way China chooses to manage its affairs with Hong Kong is the business of China. China government are the best placed to know how to manage their homes and how to manage Hong Kong. Nobody outside has a better knowledge of how to manage China. We in Uganda, our position is that nobody has a right to interfere in the internal affairs of Uganda. We similarly believe that the Chinese have a right to manage their own internal affairs as they so wish.
As an overseas Chinese living in South Africa, I am always concerned about the situation in Hong Kong. It has been more than 5 months since the turmoil in Hong Kong. I am very sad to see the negative impact and loss caused by the riots on Hong Kong's tourism economy and people's livelihood.
We have seen that police officers who try to stop or try to bring law and order have been attacked, but this is not reported in the media. So they are preventing the police from doing their work.
Self-testing kits were launched in Kenya May 2017 to scale up the fight against HIV/AIDS. Essentially, an individual is tasked with collecting specimen and conducting a test to interpret their own results. With nearly 500,000 people in Kenya who are living with the virus without knowing, this discreet and convenient approach has been seen as a relief by many who fear to take the test in hospital. What you gonna do now that you have me all to yourself? So come and get this before we get down to business.
It's the latest campaign in Kenya against HIV and AIDS. The song features Kenya's top musicians promoting HIV self-testing.
The self-test, yes, is a good thing that has ever happened in this country. But do people have a knowledge on what is this?
A campaign is underway to popularize the kits.
The way you're going to interpret it is the way you interpret the normal HIV test kit. That is, one red line means you're HIV negative.
The kits cost around $8 in selected pharmacies. It was introduced along the pre-exposure prophylaxis pill.
PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis. It is basically a drug that is taken for someone who feels that they are in constant exposure from getting HIV. So PrEP is taken once a day, and it is when somebody starts taking PrEP, they should take it for at least 7 days for it to be effective. And then from then on, they're going to be taking it every day.
These approaches seek to reach people, particularly those at high risk who may not otherwise take a test. One particular group is the male sex workers. The practice is illegal in Kenya, and as a result, many sex workers battle stigma and discrimination.
It is hard, and it is not just to male sex workers. It will also go to the whole general populations. And I give an example, like if someone has an STI, the first thing that you'll be asked in those government facilities or public facilities is, who did you have sex with? Go bring your partner. And what brought me there is about maybe have an infection or have an STIs. So we need to treat the STI first before we tell people to go home and get their partners.
Actually, the male sex workers are the ones who are coming for their self-test kits a lot, because it helps them know if they are safe with whomever they are going to have sex with when they are at work, because that's their job.
Yes, the self-test is good because first, according to the national guideline within NASCOP, every sex worker or every person who uses drugs or every man who have sex with men, they're supposed to do a quarterly test, which is 3 months, after every 3 months. So you don't have to go to the government facility and start a queue, because sex workers have knowledge. So I think this is a relief for people. It also reduces the rate of mortality among sex workers.
Sex workers make up 9% of the total number of new HIV infections globally. In Kenya, the group has the highest HIV prevalence, with men having sex with men being at around 18%. It's estimated that there are more than 200,000 sex workers in Kenya. 40,000 operate in the capital, Nairobi. The WHO says addressing these gaps could help end the epidemic.
If we had PrEP, those days, we could have actually saved so many souls, not only me or other people, so many souls we could have been saved. So I think we didn't need to promote self-test, we also need to promote self-test and also PrEP, and also ARVs, like U equals U. When you test positive and you adhere to your medication, then you have undetectable viral load, and the chances of infecting someone is 0.something.
Chamuhono, CGTN.
Last week, Tanzania marked a big milestone in the fight against HIV/AIDS after the government legalized self-HIV testing in the country. The bill was passed by Parliament and would allow citizens to buy HIV test kits at pharmacies without a doctor's prescription. CGTN's Daniel Kiju has that story.
Tanzania says it's taking the war against HIV to the next level. It has now made it legal for anyone over the age of 15 to test themselves for the virus. Medical experts say the move will help the country to meet the 90-90-90 goals, which focus on ending the AIDS pandemic by 2020.
This will increase the penetration in the number of people who avail themselves for testing for the HIV virus.
Tanzania's health ministry reports show that new infections on teens aged 15 to 19 are high, with 65,000 new infections yearly, 80% being girls. Tanzania has 1.4 million people living with HIV, but only 62% of the population know their status. Now the government hopes that with this new testing method, that number could increase up to 90%. Before the bill, testing was only done in labs, using rapid tests and enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay. The new tests have not been made available yet, but doctors say users have to take into account that the virus also has an incubation period. So even with a self-test, it's important to test again after 3 months.
With certain tests, you might have contacted the disease 5 days ago, and the fact that your result is negative does not necessarily mean that you are HIV negative.
The government says that self-testing should be voluntary. It will also require the person assisting one to undertake HIV self-testing to maintain confidentiality. Views on the issue are mixed.
This is a good thing. It will help us know our status.
There are some who would like this method, but some won't. It's scary. Some might not be mentally ready.
Young people currently account for 40% of new infections. It's hoped that the nation can use this testing method to save the lives of its youth, who account for 60% of its population. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
More than 6.5 million women in Nigeria use modern methods of contraceptives, the highest figure in the country's history. But the nation still lags behind in the Family Planning 2020 goals for modern contraceptive growth compared to countries like Kenya, Chad, Cameroon and Ghana. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam tells us more.
A variety of oral contraceptives are available in pharmacies like this one, and they're purchased over the counter. One of the most frequently sought after is the Postinor 2, known as the morning after pill. In spite of the growing awareness of modern methods, young Nigerian women like Chizoba prefer the use of this oral contraceptive for reasons of accessibility and affordability.
I do prefer Postinor 2. It's easy, it's just 2 pills. It's easy to take morning after you take it, and then there's no risk of me spotting. It's just convenient.
No prescription is needed for contraception, for Postinor 2 particularly. It does not require a doctor's prescription. Anyone can walk in and demand for Postinor 2.
More Nigerian women are embracing modern contraceptives like injectables, implants and inserts, but still far below the global target.
There are over 40 million women of childbearing age here in Nigeria. In 2017, government committed to achieve a modern contraceptive rate of 27% by 2020. But with a few weeks to the target year, the country still stands at about 12%. That's less than half of its target.
A lot of religions kind of frown against contraception, like I'll say like the Catholic faith. They don't really accept many of these methods. So I think these two factors and some others would actually affect the accepting of or the embracing of this contraception.
Family planning is at the heart of population management. The UN estimates Nigeria's population would more than double to 440 million people by 2050, making it the world's 4th largest. The national budget for family planning in 2019 is down by about 90% compared to the previous year. Another major factor that negates the actualization of the FP 2020 target. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
South Africa's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research has for the first time showcased its nanotechnologies lab. The aim of this is to engage society about the role and benefits of nanotechnologies in advancing South Africa's molecular research and development capabilities. It's also meant to assist in dealing with the impact of plastic in the country's economy and the social well-being of citizens. CGTN's Ulisa Njamela has more.
Plastic is popular because it's easy to use, flexible and durable. But 8 tons of that plastic ends up as waste, and only 9% gets to be recycled. While plastic has many valuable uses, humanity has become addicted to single-use or disposable plastic with severe environmental consequences. But the African continent is not sitting idle. According to the United Nations, within the last 4 years, a number of African countries have in some way banned plastic use. In South Africa, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, or CSIR, has developed nanotechnologies. CSIR researchers rely on nanotechnology to manufacture, manipulate, and use materials at the nanoscale to achieve higher performance of plastic materials.
So the equipment behind me is a 5-layer film blowing machine, which is able to do actually 5 layers of different materials or of similar materials. And we use this specifically to make film kind of products. And these products could be, your mulch film, your carrier bags, or any other thin film that you use in your daily life. And the kind of products that we're developing at the moment is high barrier material, and we're using a technology called nanoclay technology, where we're putting these small, very little particles into the middle layer of your film to enhance certain properties.
Experimental results have proved that nanocomposites lead to new and improved properties. Hence, CSIR wants to target certain industries that still utilize large amounts of plastic.
Specifically, we are targeting certain industries, the food packaging industry, where you require very high barrier oxygen and water vapor barrier for certain food application.
For the first time ever, the Research Institute allowed us to view some of the latest chemical processes and plastic formulations.
This is the injection molding machine. It's our pilot scale equipment to mold the materials that we produce for testing. So basically, after you formulated your plastic material, you will put in your pellets in the hopper and it will melt through the extruder, which will then inject into the mold. The mold basically is a cavity of the shape that you want to make. And what we normally do, we mold for testing. So we want to check the properties of our material.
Nanotechnology research is a key pillar of the CSIR's activities that is focused on finding solutions that address the broader societal challenges of South Africa. Yulison Jambela for CTTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live. Time now for the day's business news with Uche.
Thanks, Penny. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. East Africa's trading bloc postpones its summit and amid simmering diplomatic tensions. And Egypt is voted the fastest growing tourist destination in Africa.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, the East African Community, which is the region's trading bloc, has postponed its head of state summit due to a lack of quorum. Now, the EAC, which consists of Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania and Uganda, has said that Burundi requested to defer the summit after one out of the 6 members was not available. The meeting, initially set for November 30th in Arusha, will now wait for January or February 2020. According to reports, the EAC has stalled various programs as a result of low budget support from its member state and is now $100 million in arrears for the year 2018 and 2019. Now, apart from slow contributions, the EAC, some members have frosty relations. Meanwhile, Egypt has been voted one of the fastest growing tourist destinations in Africa in the last year. Tourist numbers have increased by over 35% year on year, and revenue reached a record $12 billion in 2019. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim following tourists on a Nile cruise, one of the attractions for visitors in the country.
A group of tourists having dinner on the River Nile. They're enjoying the oriental and seafood after a long day of sightseeing. The group has also been treated with a cultural show and belly dancing.
I visited Sharm el-Sheikh before Cairo. The water is beautiful for diving there. We came here to have dinner and sleep after a long day, but they surprised us with a dance show and belly dancer. I enjoyed it a lot.
It's my first time in Egypt. I've enjoyed it very much. The beaches in Dahab Red Sea, and the tour in Cairo, and the show tonight. I'm definitely coming again.
Aside from the traditional tours, Nile cruise trips have become more popular with tourists. There are short 2-hour lunch and dinner cruises on the Nile in Cairo, or you can have the longer week-long trips from Cairo to Luxor and Aswan.
These are 5-star hotels in the water and not just boats. For tourists who love the Nile, we give them the opportunity to spend a few nights on the cruise. They would visit the sites during the day and then come to sleep on the Nile at night. A different experience from the traditional hotels.
Tourism inflow had seen record numbers in 2019 for Egypt. Revenue has already exceeded $12 billion, more than the peak achieved in 2010.
The tourism inflow that had been supported by the large increase of visitors coming from Eastern Europe countries that are former Soviet republics. They come mainly for the beaches, diving and safaris, but they also go for sightseeing in Cairo. They don't want to miss the ancient monuments.
This strong showing is in spite of a ban from the important Russian market, since the Russian passenger jet went down in 2016. Tour operators say the Christmas and New Year season are nearly fully booked already. And the forecast looks even more promising, especially after the recent resumption of direct flights from the UK to Sharm el-Sheikh, suspended in 2016. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, women have been left out of a lot of trade organizations because of poor organization at the institutional level and among women themselves. Head of the She Trades Initiative at the International Trade Center, Vanessa Erogbogbo, attributes this to years of exclusion for women from trade discussions. She spoke to CGTN's Hannah Viviers at the World Export Development Forum that is currently underway in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Some really interesting conversations that happened today, and one of them that really kind of was a highlight for me, and just in terms of it's going to stick in my mind for a really long time, was when the executive director of the ITC was saying that women have to get organized at continental level if we really want to take part of the African continental free trade area. And you were saying that we haven't been very good at organizing ourselves.
It's happening. The train has left the station. But we see that women aren't represented very much, and they haven't been represented in the negotiations. We need to make sure that they are represented in the implementation. And the thing is, there are mechanisms for them to get involved, but they're not accessing them yet. So I think, even at the national level, we talk about getting organized at the continental level, but even at the national level, in some countries you find a large number of women business associations not working together, not coordinating together. And I think it's an element of some competition. One thing is clear: if there's one message that we're taking away with us from this week, is that we need to get women from Madagascar to Senegal, from South Africa to Tunisia together.
I think of the book Lean In that I was reading, and just reading through some of the things, and I was thinking some of the things that we have as women that are barriers and drawbacks are so instilled in us from such a young age. And I was reading this book and thinking, I am doing this to my daughter, not even realizing, because we are so conditioned.
Yes.
And so it does take some training to be able to get away from some of that conditioning. So that now that I'm at the table, I've got this opportunity, I can now take this opportunity and make the best of it. So just speak to us about some of what WEDF does and some of what the ITC does to be able to equip women so that they do have those kinds of skills.
We do a couple of things. Firstly, there's a lot of training that goes into this. Women need to have the technical skills. Secondly, they need to have the right products, the good quality products. Third, they need to be trained to have the right level of confidence. So here at WEDF in Addis Ababa this week, we're co-hosting also the She Trades event during the WEDF. And you see the women get together, energized. We really motivate them and inspire them to have confidence in themselves. But one thing I always think about in my own professional work is when I have a tough negotiation, I often think about the negotiations I have to do with my own children. And I find that these types of soft skills that are natural to women, we should make more use of them. We should leverage them to our advantage and use them in the workplace. And this is the future of the workplace, right? It's changing. It's becoming more complex. It's becoming more diverse. And a broader range of skills is going to be required. Women are used to multitasking. And we can really make use of some of these skills.
So from what I was reading, just from a WEDF point of view, it sounded as though we're talking about something like $67 million that have come in new deals for women entrepreneurs because of some of this facilitation. And one of the things that WEDF does is bring buyers, pretty much bringing the market to the participants that come here. So just speak to us about that facilitation of that business-to-business meetings when it comes to women entrepreneurs and how you match them to be able to say, well, this is where a possible deal could happen.
So what we do is ITC has very good connections with the markets. And of course, we have this wonderful pipeline of fantastic new businesses coming through. So we typically screen them and try and identify the types of products that buyers might be interested in. Then we do a lot of training before we bring the women entrepreneurs and other SMEs.
Well, let's shift our focus now to China's ongoing financial reforms. The Chinese government has introduced a variety of policies since late last year to attract additional foreign investment. That has pushed foreign holdings of Chinese stocks to a record high. Here's Chen Tong with the details.
In the middle of downtown Shanghai, the office of Nomura Orient International Securities opened in July. Last year, China's financial watchdog announced it will allow foreign institutions to hold a majority stake in local finance firms. And this March, Japan's largest securities trader Nomura got approval to set up their own joint firm here. What was the attraction? China's expanding A-share market.
Asia is changing in the eyes of investors. It's an index called MSCI, and investors look at MSCI APAC. The biggest single geography right now is Japan, but by 2022, China succeeds Japan as the biggest territory in the region. So for Nomura as a firm, we need to reorient geographically, and China's the biggest market.
China's allowing foreign players to hold majority stakes has also helped increase the amount of Chinese equities held by foreigners. Data from the Chinese central bank show that Chinese equities held by foreigners hit a record as of the end of September, up nearly 40% in a year. In a further international expansion, during the second Import-Expo this month, China's Ministry of Finance sold its first Eurobonds in 15 years in Paris.
The message from CIE set a very strong determination that the capital account opening is still one of the main objectives for the nations in the next few years. And the expansion is not only limited to the US as past, but we also will probably expand into the Eurozone. So we will probably expect the increasing security house and the banking probably will continue to come to China. And this is also a very good news for the capital account opening because, these houses are, when they have the branches overseas and also in China, so onshore and offshore connection probably will help the China capital market to further open in a more smooth way.
Industry insiders are even saying that The introduction of more foreign capital is expected to ease monetary pressure on financing liquidity, especially for smaller-sized firms.
Well, the stability in the financial market is very important to stabilize the economy as well, because the lower bond yield, higher bond prices actually will also to help ease the company's funding connections.
More favorable policies are coming. The CSRC said in October that starting next year, China will gradually cancel limits on foreign stakeholdings in local futures firms, wealth management companies, and brokerages. These moves are expected to virtually eliminate restrictions on foreign finance players entering the China market. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but ahead on Global Business Africa, troubled South African Airways now risks being placed under liquidation. We'll bring you more on that top of the hour. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Ute. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Cote d'Ivoire set for Africa Cup of Nations Sesifoot in Nigeria.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.